Crimp beads are an essential part of jewellery making, but they're not very pretty, so let's look at ways to disguise them. Hi, my name's Carol. We use crimp beads to stop the beads falling off a piece of jewellery, usually a bracelet or a necklace, or any other piece of jewellery where we use a flexible wire. In some designs, we actually can use the crimp bead as part of the design. Back in the 2000s, early 2000s, there was this huge trend to put beads dotted along a piece of wire and hold them firm with a crimp bead. So we're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking purely about how to cover them up. But first, let's look at the difference between a crimp bead and a crimp tube. So a crimp tube is it's really just a tube. It's a cylindrical little tube, usually about 1.5 or 2 millimeters long. A crimp bead, however, it looks more like a bead. It's usually a bit rounder. So when would you use a crimp bead over a crimp tube? A crimp bead is used when you want something to look pretty. So you're going to see your crimp bead. A crimp tube has more contact with the wire, so is therefore more secure. Today we're going to be using crimp tubes because we're going to be covering them up. So I've made some bracelets and I have already crimped one end, and I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to crimp the other end and cover that crimp. If you haven't used crimp beads before and you haven't even strung a necklace or a bracelet before, I would suggest that you go and watch this video, and that is a beginner tutorial on how to string a necklace. If you want to make the bracelets that I've made to show you today, let me know in the comments section below and I will do a tutorial for you. I've also prepared an accompanying blog post to go along with this tutorial, and it's the top link in the description box below, and it contains links to the crimp tubes, the crimp covers, etc. that I'm using today, as well as the tools. It will contain a written instruction of what we're talking about today. The first way we're going to talk about is using a Carlotte clamp or a bead tip. The terms are interchangeable. So if you're searching online, you might search for a bead tip and you might find it also as a Carlotte clamp, so use both terms. So I have already crimped my first end. The thing I like about Carlotte clamps is that they are really nice and easy to use. In my opinion, this is the easiest way to hide a crimp tube. They also give you the added advantage of having a loop at the end so you can attach your findings. So there it is, and you can see it's looking pretty cool. It's nice and neat, and I have attached here one end of my hook and eye clasp. So this is the eye part of my clasp. So let's have a look at how you actually create this. So on my bracelet, I have strung my beads and I've got my last 3 millimeter bead here. And as I said, if you want me to show you how to make this bracelet, then leave me a comment below and tell me you would like me to do a tutorial. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is put on our Carlotte clamp. This is what our Carlotte clamp looks like. They're also known as clamshells as well, so lots of interchangeable names. So basically it's just this little clamshell at the bottom and it has this loop on the top. It has a small hole at the bottom. So we are going to thread it onto our tiger tail, and I'm using a 0.38 millimeter tiger tail here. Now you'll notice I'm using silver and I'm making a gold bracelet. Doesn't matter, you're not going to see it anyway. Normally I would probably use a gold one, but this is demonstration purposes only. I have my Carlotte clamp on there. And next I'm going to put on my crimp tube. And it's disappeared right down inside there. And I'm going to get into trouble here, I know I am, because I'm going to say that it's okay for beginners to just squeeze their crimp bead closed. The purists out there who say, and I've had this comment before, if you're going to teach people, you teach them to do it right. Well, I have never had a flat squashed crimp bead fail on me. So if you've watched my 3 ways to crimp a necklace video, you will know that you can squash them flat. You can also use your crimping pliers to squash them in the middle like this and then fold them over. So lots of people say that the correct way is to have them folded over. Personally, I think for beginners it is absolutely okay to just squash them. As I said, I've only ever had one folded over fail, and that was just once. And I have never had one squashed flat. If you're hiding it inside a crimp cover or a Carlotte clamp, I don't think there's any reason to take that extra step. If you do want to fold them over, you will need to use a pair of crimping pliers. These ones are my Xuron crimping pliers. Right now what we're going to do is just use our chain nose pliers. I'm just going to open this up a bit so you can see a bit better. These are quite bendy, so you can see I just opened it with my fingers there. Now I want to push it right down to my beads here. You don't want it to make it too tight so your wire doesn't move, but you want it fairly close. And I'm going in there with my pliers, with the tip of my pliers, and I'm giving it a squeeze. So now everything is nice and tight and it won't move. So then all I need to do is trim off my wire with my flush cutters. Nice and close, don't worry, it's not scary at all. And then I'm going to actually use my fingers first to close up, if I can get a hold of it, to close up that clamp, and I'm just giving it a squeeze. So I'll get to a certain point and I actually can't do it anymore, or it's easier to do with my pliers. So you can see there what I'm doing is closing that up. So there we go. Now the advantage of this, as I said, has this hook on it. So to put on my clasp, all I need to do is put it through that hook. I'm going to take my pliers, and I can do this with my round nose pliers too, but you don't need to. And I'm just going to twist that in so that it meets up with the other end. So there's my clasp on there, and as you can see, the Carlotte clamps look nice and professional. They are nicely finished and you really can't tell that the crimp bead is there. So that's number one, and honestly one of my favorites. If you're interested in making the jewelry I'm wearing today, the necklace I made when I showed you how to use shape and texture in a necklace or in a piece of jewelry. The earrings are my vintage inspired earrings, and the bracelet is a memory wire bracelet with magnetic beads. So I will leave you links to all of those tutorials in the description box below. So the second way is to use a crimp cover. Now crimp covers, if you've been watching for a while, you will know they are my kryptonite. I absolutely avoid them like the plague, but they do a really good job of hiding your crimp. So I'm going to attempt it today just for you. Once you squeeze a crimp cover closed, it looks just like a metal bead. So let's have a look at how you can do this. So crimp covers come in lots of sizes to match your jewelry, and I have one here. I've made this copper bracelet, and there you can see the crimp cover is right at the end there, and it just looks like a copper bead. So to do this, I'm going to take off my bead stopper, and I'm going to put on my crimp tube. Now I actually prefer, when I'm using crimp tubes, to kind of go fishing with the end of my tiger tail rather than actually picking them up, because I find them easier to catch that way. So there's my crimp tube on, and next I'm going to put on my jump ring. I've got a 4mm copper jump ring that is really well closed, and that is going to be the opposite end, so my clasp will do up into it. So I'm going to pop that on as well. Then I'm going to feed my tiger tail back down through my crimp bead, and I'm going to take it through a couple of beads if I can. These beads have quite small holes, but it'll go through one at least. Aren't these beads gorgeous? I love these rondelles. They're absolutely stunning. So you can see here I'm pulling everything up. I've got my finger in the loop and pulling everything up. Now I want to make sure that I pull it up close but not too close. So I don't want it too close. I still need my bracelet to be able to move. It is actually a little bit stiff, so I'm going to pull my crimp bead up a little bit just to give it a little bit more space. So the idea is I want my crimp bead close to the jump ring, but also allowing the jump ring to move around, and close enough to the beads, but I also want my bracelet to be able to move. I also need to leave a little bit of space here so that my crimp cover, which is like this, looks like a little Pac-Man, and it's a 3mm one, so it's quite tiny, but I need to leave a little bit of space so my crimp bead can have some space in there as well. So I am going to squash my crimp bead. So now everything's nice and tight, and once again I'll get into trouble for doing it flat, but that's okay. And I'm going to come in here with my cutters and cut off the end of my tiger tail. Now, it's also interesting, some people prefer to go back through some beads with their tiger tail and hide their end that way. Other people just cut it off. It's just a personal preference thing. Now, I am going to take my crimping pliers here because they are nice and fine and they make this easier. And I'm going to try and pick up my crimp cover and pop it on. Now, when I did the other end, I did it perfectly, so hopefully I can today too. I'm coming in there. Nope, I dropped it. Try again. So you want to hold it nice and firmly like that in your pliers and pop in there. I think the reason you have problems is because you don't leave enough space. So you can see I've got it on there and I'm going to give it a squeeze. And you just continue to squeeze it until it's closed. My jump ring's getting in the way. And sometimes I like to turn it round and give it a squeeze as well, the other way. So that was reasonably painless. So there's my bracelet with its two crimp covers, one on either end. And as you can see, it's just hiding everything and it looks pretty good. But as I said, not my favorite way. So the third way I'm going to show you is probably more suited to a necklace than a bracelet, but I did it on a bracelet because I didn't want to string a whole necklace, that's all. So it's using a Bead Bandit. Now, Bead Bandit is a little screw thing that covers your crimp bead, and they're a little bit more expensive, but they look amazing on a necklace when it's done. So let me show you how I do that. So this is what my Bead Bandit looks like with my clasp on. And doesn't it look lovely? It's nice and professional looking. So you can see it unscrews into two parts. So this is the screw part and it screws up into here. What I'm going to do is pop the tiger tail through the hole at the bottom of the Bead Bandit. And can you see that hole? So I'm going to thread my tiger tail through there and feed it down to my beads. Next, I'm going to put on my crimp tube. And I'm just going to give it a squeeze. It sits on the top of the screw. Just making sure that it's all nice and tight and it's not going to move. And then I'm going to come in with my cutters and cut off my wire. So that's what I have now. Next, I am going to screw on the top. There we go, that's what that looks like. And of course, if I wanted to finish this necklace, I would come in with my jump ring and open it up. And I'll leave you a link to a video on how to use jump rings as well in the description box, and just feed that onto my loop of the whole of my Bead Bandit and close that up. So there's my clasp with its Bead Bandits attached. As I said, it would be better to use this on a necklace rather than a bracelet, just simply because this takes up quite a bit of space. But it still actually looks really wonderful, and I think that that could be incorporated as part of the design. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Now, before we go any further, can I ask you a favour? If you're enjoying this, would you please subscribe, hit that notification bell and give me the thumbs up. That way YouTube will know that you're enjoying my videos and share more of them with you. Next, I'm going to show you a little trick that I've recently discovered and I really like it. This is actually probably my favourite, where you can use it. You can't always use this trick. So let's have a look. What we're going to do is use a bead to cover up our crimp tube. And you can see here, I've used this 6mm metal ball and it's just sitting there over my crimp tube. It's not squashed or anything like that. It's not a crimp cover, it's just a bead. So let me show you how I did that. This is a toggle clasp and it's attached to a jump ring, and I've just put my wire, my tiger tail, up through the jump ring and crimped it just like I would any other time. Basically just how I did with the crimp cover. And then I just slid the bead up over the crimp tube. As I said, I use those terms interchangeably and I probably shouldn't. To do the other end, what we're going to do, now this is a little bit trickier, but it's still within realms of possibility. We're going to take our crimp tube and thread it on. And you'll note that I don't have my other bead on there. So I haven't put my silver bead on yet. And then we're going to thread it back down through the crimp tube and through one of my beads. And I'm going to pull it up. Now my crimp tube keeps disappearing inside my bead, so I'm just holding it between my fingernails there. So the trick is to leave enough space that my bead is still going to cover it, but I've got enough to have a loop sticking out of the bead to attach my jump ring. Then what I'm going to do is squeeze my crimp bead. So that's what I have. And I'm going to cut off my end. Now the trick is to get this end through the bead. So obviously you need a bead with a reasonably large hole here. If you can't get it through, take another piece of tiger tail and thread it through the loop. Grab your two ends and thread that through a bead. There we go. So there it is. And you can see the tiger tail sticking out there, and that's enough for me to attach my jump ring. So to do that, I'm going to take 2 pairs of my chain nose pliers. Just holding my jump ring on either side and twisting down, threading it through the loop and through the loop of my toggle clasp, if I can get it to stay on, and closing up my jump ring. So there's my bracelet with its toggle clasp, and its toggle clasp is really cute. I love it. I actually prefer to use a toggle clasp on a bracelet because it's easier for me to do up. You will need to use matching tiger tail with this because you do get to see it, but I really like it. I think it's one of my new favorite ways to cover a crimp bead. I promised you a vital tip. If you've been watching my channel for a while, this will come as no surprise to you, but in my opinion, this is the best way to cover a crimp bead. In fact, it's not covering a crimp bead at all. What I'm going to show you is how I use my magical crimping pliers to make a crimp bead or crimp tube look like a bead. So here's my bracelet. Isn't this one pretty? I love the colors. Now, this time we're going to be using a magical crimp tube, and you'll notice it's a little bit different from the crimp tubes that we've been using. It's larger. So this one is a 1.5mm crimp and this is a 2mm crimp. And I know that's a tiny, tiny amount, but you can see the difference between the two. So I'm going to pop that one away and use my magical crimp. People often ask me if they can use other crimps with their magical crimping plier. I have tried it with that 1.5mm crimp and it didn't work because the crimp tube was too small. So if you were to buy a 2mm crimp, it may work. I'm not saying it won't. I'm not saying it will. You will have to try it for yourself. I have not tried it. All I know is that my 2mm magical crimps work really well with my magical crimping tool. Here's what it looks like. Can you spot it? This tiny wee bead here, this silver bead, is actually my crimp. So the magical crimp tool, which looks like this, it makes your crimp tube look like that bead, and that is why I love it so much. It's also super easy to use. So I'm going to take off my bead stopper. I've got a jump ring that is really well closed because it's going to be, the tiger tail is going to be going through it and I don't want it to fall off. And I'm going to pick up my crimp tube. And there it is. And it's next to a 3mm bicone, so you can see it's quite, it's a good size. And then I'm going to take my jump ring and put it through and thread that tiger tail back through my crimp tube. And let's see if it can go through any of my beads. These beads have quite small holes, so let's have a look. No. All right, so we're just going to pull it down and chop it off at that end. So just pulling everything down and making it nice and firm. Still need movement, so not too firm, but you just don't want any gaps. So if it gets stuck, just pull the crimp bead back down and that will resolve it. So you can see there, I have a little bit of space for my tiger tail going through my jump ring. Everything still moves nicely, so you don't want it too tight. It's nothing worse than making a necklace or a bracelet too tight and it gets stuck. Now I'm going to take my magical crimping tool, and you can see here it has a divot in the front. So what I'm going to do is put my crimp tube in that divot and give it a squeeze. And that's what it looks like now. Then I'm going to turn it on its side and give it another squeeze. Just getting my jump ring out of the way. And that's it. Wasn't that easy? So easy to use. Now sometimes I do find that I do need to give it another squeeze, and sometimes I go around, just turning it around and just giving it a squeeze all the way around just to make sure it's nice and round. Now I'm going to take my cutters and snip that end off nice and close. So there it is. And I really love this because they just look like silver beads to me, and it's so super easy to use. I hope you found this tutorial useful. Remember, the top link in the description box is to the blog post, and that contains links to the supplies that I used, not to the bracelet. If you want me to do a tutorial for the bracelets, let me know in the comment section below, and which bracelet you preferred, which was your favourite. Remember to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, hit that subscribe button, have a wonderful day, and I will see you again soon.